Nana5 writes, My daughter gave me a dozen different photos of my grandsons from a photo shoot they had done. They are all 5x7 prints. I also have larger prints of my favourites, so I want to scrap all the 5x7s. Do you have any sketches or ideas for scrapping that size print? Glitter Girl, can you help Nana5 find fabulousness in 5x7?
Of course I can. Today I'm going to take you through two different layouts using the 5x7 photo size, one landscape and one portrait, and one with just the photo on its own, that'll be the landscape picture, and one mixing the 5x7 size with another image, which in this case is a 3-inch square photo. So I'm going to start with the image that's all on its own, and this is the second video in kind of a little mini series which we can call Glitter Girl's Guide to Scrapbooking Weddings. So the supplies that you're going to see me use today, I highlighted last week in the first wedding album adventure, and that's an extended episode. So if you haven't watched that one, I would go back and have a look, especially if you want a little bit more info on the products. And I'm using this color scheme of some neutrals, like a light and a dark brown, with pinks, several different shades of pink, and a bit of green, and those two colors were the wedding colors. So I have this 5x7 landscape of the bride, her father, and the ring bearer coming up the path to the wedding ceremony. And I'm going to start developing a page layout that will use that size photo just on its own and really bring your attention to the picture. I'm using this neutral craft and cream sort of trellis pattern for my background, and that's from the new My Mind's Eye Find Your Wings and Fly collection. And then I'm building a horizontal strip to go with the landscape photo. And I wanted to kind of emphasize here that I'm not measuring, I'm just looking at the ratios of things and then being able to eyeball that. So for example, to figure out what size I wanted to cut this pink paper, which is a Pebbles pattern paper, I took the photo, which is a 5x7 print, and placed it in the top corner of the 12x12 paper. So if I put that up here, then you can imagine that this is the 12x12 sheet. And I added enough room around the two corners here so that I would have a wide photo map. And then I just cut this horizontal strip all the way across because I'm just looking here. I'm only looking at one measurement at a time, and I just want to even out the space below the photo with the space I've picked to the top and side of the picture. And you can go ahead and adhere it if that helps, but I use a repositionable adhesive so that I can adhere things and move the layers around, but it does eventually get a little bit easier and you can just hold it in place. So I haven't put any adhesive on this picture yet. So I cut just that one length to start, and then I know that I want to take this pink box and make it a little bit more central in the composition of the page. So I want to have some border either side of the craft cardstock, or well, it's not cardstock, craft pattern paper. So I cut a little bit more off this side of the pink paper so that I knew I would have enough space to show the border of the background going all around. So I've not needed to make any measurements there. I'm just looking at the photo and then looking at one measurement at a time. From there, I know that I want to make sure that I'm representing all the colors in my color scheme. So I have the light brown and I have the pink. I'd like to bring in the green, and I don't want the green to overwhelm this design because there's so much green in the background that bringing too much green into the page design will make your eye go to the background and the greenery and the trees rather than to the lovely bride in the center of the photo. So I'm going to use my green pattern paper to mat my picture so that I'm getting just a touch of the green around the edge, but I'm not getting green as a big statement on the page. So again, I just take my photo and I line it up in the corner of the 12x12, and once I have decided on the width for these two sides, then I just cut the other two sides to match. Again, I'm not measuring. I suppose you could measure that if you know this is a 5x7 print and you know that that's about 1/8 of an inch. You add a 1/4 of an inch to each side and you can do it that way as well. But I know several of you have said that you need a little bit of help with figuring out what size to cut things, and I think you will have much more enjoyment if you start looking at just one thing at a time with your eye rather than having to feel that you need an exact measurement for each piece. So at this point, I was on that idea of I need to get all of my colors present. And if I place all of this here on the page, you'll see that I don't have that darker anchoring brown color. So that's where I'm going to bring in some cardstock. And I'm just going to place the pink piece of paper, and I can take this off for the moment, onto a dark brown cardstock. And I know I'm going to cut 2 sides here. Now, I know that I'm not going to put anything else in between these two, so I can go ahead and adhere this. Also, this I will go ahead and adhere because I know I'm going to have this as a nice straight mat. I'm not going to be tilting it. If I did tilt it, I would not apply the adhesive. I would still do the same thing to cut it, and I would be cutting it the same size. It's just that I would hold it in place while I put it on the trimmer to cut those 2 corners. But instead of going ahead and sticking it down, and that way I'll be able to take the 2 pieces that are the right size but offset them to get that little bit of an angle. But for this page, I know it's going to be a little bit more orderly, so I can go ahead and use my trimmer to cut these 2 sides to match the 2 narrow sides I've already decided. Then I can center that matted pink rectangle. I know that all my colors are represented now, and I can start adhering the layers to my page. So I have the photo and the mat that are going to go over here, and that means I'm going to be working on this side. If that's a question as to why did I know I was going to put the photo over here, I'm looking at the viewing line of the people in the photograph. Everybody in this picture is looking this way, and the leading line in the photo is leading you on a path this way toward the bottom of the page. So this is where they've come from, and this is where they're going to. So I want to keep their eye line onto the page. If I place it over here, it looks like they're walking off the page into oblivion. If I place it over here, there's just a subtle little thing that will happen in your mind, and the design will be that much softer that it will feel like they have space to keep walking, and it won't be unsettling to the eye. So that's why I'm going to place it over there. I do want to go ahead and build some more layers in. So I have this sheet, which is from a 6x6 glitz paper pad with these lovely soft pinks and browns and little cloud shapes. And again, I'm not measuring, I'm just looking at what is already on the page. So here, I know I have that green mat, and I want this box to be just a little bit taller than that green mat so that when I layer it underneath like this, I can see it. So I don't need to measure anything. I just place the 2 together, make a little divot with my nail onto the pattern paper, and then that's my cut line. And I can go ahead and start adhering all of these elements to the box. I didn't add ink to that bright pink because it has the dark brown mat, and I didn't want to add any distressed look to that nice bold pattern, the boldness of that color. So I left it off there, but I'm going to be adding it to some of the other elements so that they are a bit softer around the edges, like the white and the pink. Now I can start adding in smaller elements to try and layer up and give my page a little bit of embellishment and figure out where the embellishment's going to go, and then I'll be able to place my larger items like my title and my journaling. So I have 2 small pieces from the cut apart sheets that I've picked for this set of supplies that I'm going to use throughout the album. They're not technically cut apart sheets, they're not like 3x4 cards or anything like that, but they're designs of pattern paper that are easy to cut apart and have small repeating elements. So I have a little watercolored Polaroid style frame and a ticket that says "Lovely Day." And I'm going to build these into the layers here on the side and just play with what looks best. Do I like it tucked underneath the mat, tucked underneath the photo, or on top of everything there? I also have my little hearts that I've cut with that Lawn Fawn die that I'm going to repeat throughout the whole album. So I have those in the different colors and different sizes, so I can figure out where I'd like those to go in this little cluster of embellishments that's going to live next to the photo. By looking at the different sizes I had available in the supplies that I'd already picked, I found that I had this pink frame that brought in the gold. That's from the Pier die cut collection by Crate Paper. And it's a size that lets me see just a little bit of this pink frame around the edge, and that's the original piece that I started with, and then I built on top of that with the ticket and two of the little hearts. So I'm just looking for things that let me see just a tiny little bit, and because this bit is cut from a pattern paper and I have dozens of those little frames, it doesn't worry me that I'm only seeing a little bit of it. I love that there's that subtle detail that's just a little bit more layered than if it weren't there at all. So I know that that's going to go over here, but I'd also like to bring in something that's not quite so boxy. So before I adhered this, I looked for different things that would bring in something that was a little bit more round and soft, and I have this pink doily sticker from My Mind's Eye Sweetest Thing collection. I don't want to use the whole thing here because part of it's going to be underneath the photo. And I want to make sure that I have enough that it's going to show behind there. So I'm going to just cut the sticker right on the sticker sheet. And then I can use part of it now and part of it later. They also do this sticker in at least white, if not also maybe blue or gray. There are a few different doily stickers that are this sort of size that My Mind's Eye has had in recent collections. So now I can adhere that and then take my little bundle of embellishments and layer it on top. And that looks about right for me to start working on my title. I often use more subtle titles on wedding pages than everyday type layouts, because I think in a wedding album I want your eye to go even more toward the photo than perhaps on any other page. So I used craft colored letter stickers in the flat and the thickers, just something that's really quite small and delicate rather than something that's big and bold on the page. Next step I want to add is also a bit delicate. I want to add a little bit of stamping with these smaller stamps from the Find Your Wings and Fly by My Mind's Eye. And I like these stamps that have a little design where you have something that's quite obvious, and then you have these tiny little subtle pieces underneath that create a sort of layered effect even though they're really only one layer. So I'm going to be stamping these over the edges of some layers with brown ink. So I just want to have a look at where things are going to go, and then I can do a little bit of moving around to make sure things will fit. For example, what I'd really like to do is have the lettering above one layer and then the more delicate pieces fall below, so that my lettering ends up resting on one of those horizontal lines. In this case, I decided I would use the rest of that doily sticker with the stamp and place the lettering of the stamp on the sticker, and then have the little filigreed edge go over onto the photograph. Now, one thing that may happen is that the ink may appear a little bit different in finish on different kinds of paper. So it appears quite matte here on top of the matte sticker, but because I'm stamping onto a glossy photo paper, the ink here picks up a little bit of gloss, and that does make the color look a little bit darker. Now, that doesn't bother me, and I quite like the layered effect of the stamp onto the photo paper, but it's something to be aware of in case it's not something you would like. I don't think it's something that everyone will necessarily be happy with, and I would hate for you to stamp onto your photo and then feel that you didn't like it. So it may be best, if you are printing onto a large sheet rather than ordering individual prints, that you stamp onto a little scrap of it, or maybe if you have a print that isn't particularly fabulous, or one that you've cropped to another size, that will give you a little bit of an indication of what that particular ink pad will look like on the photo paper, so you can keep that in mind. Now, because I've added this photo over here, I really want to build up a little bit more embellishment here in this corner to balance what I've added over here. And this pattern paper, which is also from the same collection as the stamp, has this beautiful rose pattern that reminds me a little bit of my beloved Sassafras Foldies, because it has all the different florals in the bouquet. So I've just cut this out with my scissors and I'm going to layer it underneath here. I put some pop dots on the sticker so that I could get it in the right place, but I didn't take the backing off so that I'd be able to place different layers behind and figure out what I wanted to add. I also have this little spot of the sticker I need to make sure I cover with some sort of embellishment because that shows where I cut that sticker in half and I'd rather that not be on display. So I'll just add some little small part to the embellishment that will cover that and it shouldn't be a problem. So with this one finished, my first advice for a single 5x7 print is to not be afraid to use plenty of open space on the rest of the layout so that your attention is drawn to that photo and it gets a bit of a special treatment. To finish this one, I found the green heart that was in the larger size from these two was the perfect size to bridge the gap between all these layers here. So that covers up the edge of that sticker. I was able to add in just a few gold sequins here to make this area of embellishment coordinate with the gold that's already there near the title. And for the journaling, I just separated two lines here identifying these three people. And instead of trying to cram it all into one sentence, I've just written in one line their role in the wedding, the ring bearer, the bride, the father of the bride, and then in the other, their names in the same order. So everything there is recorded, but I didn't have to try and figure that out into one unwieldy sentence. So now I'm going to transfer over to a little bit of a different design by using a 5x7 photo paired with a 3x3 square. For this second page, I'm starting with this print from the Pierre collection by Crate Paper. I loved how the kind of twist on a chevron makes the small little chevron arrows read a little bit like a heart shape if you're pointing the paper in that direction. And it also has a little bit of distressed layering here already, very, very subtle, but a nice delicate piece to add into this album. So I want to bring in pink straight away because there's just that little bit of pink in the background, and I also want to keep my layering nice and soft. So I'm going to start with this pink and white vellum from Dear Lizzie at American Crafts, and I'm going to be using that to go behind the photos instead of a heavier pattern paper. But this time I'm mixing this up a little bit to show one 5x7 photo, and it's a portrait this time, with a square photo. So this is a picture taken on my phone and printed as a 3x3 square. So they're both from the same event, but one was taken on my normal camera, my SLR, and one was taken with my phone. So I'm going to be placing them together, and again I'm going to be following the lines of the photo to figure out what the composition is best. So her eyes on the photo and the angle is all looking this sort of direction. So I'm going to be placing this photo on this side and letting her lean into the page, as it were. Using the same technique as before, I've matted the photo on the vellum, the large photo on the vellum, and the small one on the hot pink print that I used on the previous page. But again, I'm not measuring, I'm just adding, I'm just setting it in the corner and then cutting the other two sides to fit. And I'm going to be using those roses from, well, they're floral bouquets, there's more than just roses in there, from that same pattern paper that I cut apart on the last layout. So I'm going to start by building from the side in, and I wanted to use this tiny little chevron piece here as my guide because that one includes a little bit of pink and this kind of greenish yellow that matches with the floral. So I've added the floral piece there, and then I can line up my larger photo to see where I want this to overlap. And then again, I can figure out the best placement for this one. Does it go underneath? Does it go underneath the vellum? Does it go on top? But because this bit is out of the plane of focus, I can add it on top and not lose any of the focus point of this photo. And then I want to bring in more of this floral. So I'll bring this over here, and this piece is now getting quite big. So I can try a few different options, but it may be best for me to just cut this down a little bit so that it's not overwhelming the size of this particular picture. Placement works really well because then the edge of the floral then lines me up with another set of pink chevron pieces over here. So I've gone from the pink on this side to the pink on this side is just a small little detail. It's then given me this space here to go ahead and work with for my title and journaling, and I can add more embellishment around the photos, and I also have this bottom space to work with for embellishment or journaling. And I think that's one of the biggest tips for working with a 5x7 and additional photos is that you can create an L shape on your page that then gives you a little pocket of space to add in the other elements that you want to include on your layout. I wanted to take a little moment just to talk about my process with going through pages that are all from one album. So I'm already starting, in addition to the kit of supplies that I picked out to work with, I'm choosing a few other elements that will repeat throughout the whole album, little things that will show up on multiple pages. So I've added that. All you need is a love stamp that's going to appear on many of the pages in the album. And then also picked up on a stamp that I could use more than once on the same page to try and direct this L shape so that it gives it a little bit more framing with the arrow here. I do have this straight edge from the edge of the pattern paper on that floral print that I'm going to cover up, just like what happened with the doily sticker on the previous page. But I've also added in a few other things. The pink floral stamp is the same one that I used in last week's episode to add a little bit of something else behind the lettering of the title. And that's something that's going to repeat throughout. I'm using that same ink pad and the same stamp so that I have that continuity even when the pattern paper is changing. And another thing is that I keep using this same set of thickers even though I've pulled out a few others in my kit. And the idea here is that I'm not creating the pages in order. So if I go ahead and just scrap the photos in sort of a random order, and it's really kind of an order of which one catches my eye first, those will be photos that are spread throughout the day, and that means they'll be spread throughout the album in different spots. So if I go ahead and start using that alphabet that I love so much that I want to make sure that I include and I don't hold back, when those layouts are all in the album, they won't all be together. So it won't be like the first 5 layouts all have that same lettering and then I run out of those letters and it doesn't appear anymore. Instead, it will be used throughout the album and it will just show up here and there because I'll use it on as many titles as I can, but those pages will all be at a different point in the timeline, so they'll be in different spots in my album once they're arranged chronologically from the beginning of the day to the end. So I hope that makes a little sense, and at this point I want to go ahead and work on this little area of the embellishment and figure out a few little finishing touches for the page. I'm looking for something that can cover up this spot, and I have what I used on the previous page, which is one of the larger heart-shaped die cuts, and that will help with some of it, but not all of it. So I'm looking for something else that will give me a little bit more space to play with here to cover up that harsh edge of the floral pattern paper. I've actually got something right on the same sticker sheet that the pink doily came from, and that's this piece here. I don't want to use the particular lettering here because it's not my wedding album, so the wording is a little bit different for creating an album of photos that are not your own. But I'd like to use the top edge of this sticker, so just cut it like I did the doily, and add some brown around the edges, and then I should be able to bring this in as a horizontal element. And I can tuck it underneath the photo and go over as much of that edge as I want. Now that floral there has a pop dot, so I'm just going to pop one behind here too. It does mean that I'm covering up some of the stamping I did there, so I could have stamped the arrow over the top of that sticker again, but I think I'm okay with just the tinier part of the embellishment, the tinier part of the stamp design being visible there. It should still link up. And I'll add the heart in here. And then I'd really like to bring in just a little bit more green. I have a tiny bit of green here in the leaves of this floral, but I didn't end up with any leaves on this side. So maybe I can tuck in a few leaves behind here where I cut that piece into a smaller floral grouping and see if there's a good spot to add just a little bit more. I'd love to get a little bit of something like this green into this page. If in doubt, when I'm looking for a way to incorporate another element of the color scheme, I want to come back to the things that are going to repeat throughout the album. They tend to be simple things, and because they're going to be so prevalent on all the pages, they won't look out of place. So I went back to my heart dies and cut a few more with that green polka dot and scattered 3 of them on the page, one over here, one in the middle, and then a tiny one up by the larger pink heart. Now I also was able to go back to that pattern paper and find a little bit of greenery to add in behind the floral, and I'm really happy with how that balances the leaves over here. At this point, I start looking at what else is on the page or isn't on the page, in fact. Things that are on other layouts in the album but haven't appeared here. And one thing I've used so far on all of the pages is a little bit of brown and white baker's twine. Now, you may not have even noticed it on the last layout because I just tied it around the edge of that pink and gold frame. But here, I'm going to tie it around the bottom of this photo. And this is one of those things where your memory of the day can really help you work out a design choice. This picture shows kind of a looking up from the table, a look at the flowers that formed the centerpieces on the table at the wedding reception. And the flowers were up quite high, so they were above your line of sight, and you could have a conversation with anyone around your table without having the flowers in the way because the bouquets were quite large. But further down than what you see here in the picture, they were all looped with ribbon around the glass goblets that held the flowers in place. So I liked the idea of mimicking that, even though it's not there in the photo, by tying the twine around the picture in a similar spot. Now, is anybody else going to know that when they look at the layout? No. But as there are lots of things that go that way when you're making pages for your own album, that nobody else was there. They might not understand the story. They might not think it's quite as important as it is to you. And that's okay. That's what our scrapbooks are there for. They're to remember the things that are important to us, no matter what those things might be. So that means that sometimes you can use that in your design choices as well. And that's why I wanted to incorporate the twine there when I could have done other things like tied it through the side of the heart by using a tiny little needle or punch to poke a hole in the side of the heart. I could have tied it around the S that's kind of floating up here on that pop dot. But instead I wanted to incorporate something that was firm in my mind right now while this is a recent memory. Now, I have left quite a lot of open space at the bottom of this page and a lot of open space up here in the corner. And just like the previous layout, that's what I tend to do when I'm dealing with a 5x7 photo that I want to give a little bit more prominence. It means that I can use a pattern paper in the background, but use something that's a little bit subtle and won't overwhelm my photo or fight for the attention. And then your eye's going to go well to that larger photo. And I hope that helps you scrapbook some of your 5x7s. Now, that means your challenge this week is to get scrapping in a 5x7 style. You can choose to use one 5x7 or several. You can choose to use it alone or to mix it with other photos in other sizes or whatever you would like. You can use it in any style and upload it to the gallery and share it with us all. Be sure to leave us a tip in your layout description. Tell us what you like about scrapbooking with 5x7 pictures. And just to be clear, it does not have to be a wedding layout, but you're welcome to do that if you're so inspired. Thanks so much for watching. See you soon.
Join us next week for the continuing adventures of Glitter Girl and the ongoing mystery of the scrapbooker behind the mask at twopsinAbucket.com.